2021. It's great to have so many of you join us today. My name is Loveday and I am the Director of Public Engagement at Fairtrade Foundation. And it's my job to harness the passion held by the UK general public for fair trade products and the amazing producers behind them, whether that's in their role as consumers or citizens or activists. And alongside the fantastic teams at the foundation, I support businesses to inspire their shoppers to buy fair trade. So today we're going to be discussing how and why businesses work with fair trade producers to develop successful brand and marketing comms for the products that both producers and companies develop, which we all love. And a lot of people, I think, are kind of celebrating some big events, maybe the football or maybe the tennis. But for me, I'm all about World Chocolate Day, which is happening tomorrow. And so because of that, we're using cocoa as an example today, but the discussion today will be relevant for all businesses. And so I'm joined today by three fantastic experts to contribute to this discussion. First of all, Amy Morris is the Ethics and Sustainability Manager for Human Rights at John Lewis Partnership, where she works with fair trade on Waitrose Partners projects and products. And having previously worked at the co-op and also in the non-profit sector, Amy brings some really great insights into retailer sustainability work in the food supply chains and communicating that impact to shoppers. So looking forward to hearing from Amy today. Also joined by Sophie Loveday Davis, who is the Marketing Director at Divine Chocolate, which is actually co-owned by the farmers themselves. And with a background in both FMCG marketing and international development roles, having worked in East and West Africa, Sophie's a real champion of responsible business and will be sharing how she works hand in hand with the farmers to build the Divine brand. And then finally, delighted to be joined by Sondia Ouattara, who's the cocoa team leader at Fairtrade Africa, based in Ivory Coast in Côte d'Ivoire. And Sondia is an agronomist and cocoa specialist with a master's degree in plant pathologies. And her experience at Fairtrade Africa is really wide-ranging. And currently she's been working extensively with both cocoa farmers and global companies towards achieving really vital goals such as living incomes. And we'll be sharing today what producers tell her about their hopes for fair trade comms. And of course, as well as my three wonderful panelists, I'm joined by all of you. So thank you to all of you, whether you're fair trade businesses, suppliers, comms and sustainability professionals, marketeers, founders, directors, all of you are very, very welcome. Now, I will be asking our speakers some questions, but I really would welcome some questions from all of you too. So please do join in by using the Q&A function to type in your questions, or feel free to pop in any observations or comments into the chat box. So I'm actually going to get started with all of you. So we're going to kick off a little poll to start us off. So Jacob, if you could launch the poll, please. And I'd like to just get an understanding of where you all feel you are in terms of your comms and whether producers are at the heart of your comms at the moment. So if you could all please answer that. And then hopefully once we've got most people having answered, I'm going to ask Jacob to launch the second question of the poll. Which hopefully will be coming up soon. We might get the results for the first one first. So perfect, here's the second question. So how important do you think it is to your customers that producers are at the heart of your comms? So this is about your shopper and consumer insight and how important you feel it is for them that the producers behind the products are in the comms that they see from you and your brands. So I hope that we can get the answers up to your poll questions. So thank you for joining in. So whenever we have the answers through, great. So this is really interesting. So the vast majority is split pretty equally, half and half, between people feeling that producers are at the heart of the comms to some degree or a lot already, which is fantastic. So I hope that we will all be able to take away some tips and improve, even if we feel we're doing it already with producers. And in terms of customers' perspectives, really great to see that actually 54% of all of you think that it's really important to your customers too, very important to your customers too, which is fantastic. So that's a perfect scene setting actually, because certainly for us at the Fairtrade Foundation, we definitely see that through our consumer research, consumers really do care about the people behind the products, and they really want to know that by buying and supporting fair trade, they're really making a difference. So I'm just going to read out a little bit of a consumer insight from some recent research that we conducted globally, but specifically for the UK. We found that just over 2/3 of UK consumers agree that by buying fair trade, they feel like they're part of a community standing together with the farmers and producers who grow our food. And it's really interesting that since the COVID pandemic, they feel it's even more important to support fair trade. And we really see that messaging about the impact of fair trade and the impact that it has for individual farmers and workers is a real motivator to support and buy fair trade for shoppers and consumers. And interesting that that connection is to producers is even stronger with younger consumers. So I'm going to kick off actually by asking Amy, first of all, what consumer trends, Amy, have you seen when it comes to fair trade at Waitrose? Have you seen kind of increased demand for ethical and fair trade products?
Thanks, Nilofer. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I think it is fair to say we've seen an increase in demand for fair trade products. We've certainly seen year-on-year increases as we've continued to grow our fair trade range. We know that a Waitrose customer in particular cares a lot about fair trade, so we over-index in our sales of fair trade products. And I think the statistics are saying, the Kantar data says that 83% of Waitrose customers would choose a fair trade product over an alternative. So that I think is versus the market average of about 75%. 87% again say they care about fair trade versus an average of 74% across the market. So we're definitely talking to a really engaged customer. And obviously over 2020, shopping habits have been quite different. As we all know, a lot of sales have gone online. And we know that customers who are purchasing online are also particularly interested in finding out a bit more about the products that they're buying. So we did a report last year, which was called How Britain Shops, and we saw that 27% of customers were seeking the fair trade logo when they're shopping online. And that was particularly the case, as you say, with that younger audience, so that 18 to 24 age bracket, who are showing particular interest in ethical standards. And we saw some really interesting stats last year in terms of which areas have seen the increases. So in coffee, for example, I think we saw a 30% increase in searches for fair trade coffee on our website, because everybody was wanting their quality coffee at home rather than their quick one on the way to the office. And we also know that we all became bakers last year. So I think our searches online for sugar went up, fair trade sugar went up something like 94%, which is huge. Bananas as well, with all that banana bread making, went up 40%. So yeah, there's a real interest and a particularly kind of high levels of purchasing over the last year. And in terms of sort of the Waitrose brand, we know that our customer and our customer research is telling us that our customers want Waitrose to set ethical standards when it comes to taking care of people and the environment. It's particularly important to them in the customer research that we do, that we're treating our farmers and our suppliers fairly, and that we're acting responsibly in looking after the environment. And those are all kind of areas which fair trade is addressing, and that's why it's such an important marker for us and an important standard for us to work with. I think that's fair to say.
So it's great to hear, Amy, there's clearly a demand coming from consumers for fair trade products, and really interesting to hear that they're keen to learn more about the products and the producers, and know that the producers are being treated fairly. So with that, Sondia, perhaps you wouldn't mind talking to us about why is it valuable that fair trade brands enable producers to tell their stories? Why is it important?
Okay. What you might know at this stage is that an international expert in cocoa technology demonstrated in 2017 that on 100-gram bag of chocolate with 60% cocoa, but in a supermarket, only 6% of the price is paid by the price paid by the buyer is returned to the farmer, and this is critical. So Fairtrade is making a difference, and UK companies like Waitrose and also Divine are supporting the process. Farmers don't want favors, they don't want gifts, they just want their cocoa to be bought at a fair price and to benefit from all the fair trade practices. So when UK companies tell the story of fair trade producers, the impact is real. So the more consumers are engaged, the more chocolate products are sold, and the more sustainable product is collected from our farmers. So fair trade producers want to be seen. Being seen for them means that consumers know where the beans in the chocolate product come from, and they want that consumers are aware that their purchase will indeed have an impact on farmers' living conditions. So beyond that, producers want to tell their story to get more sustainable contracts. And more sales of fair trade products means for them more income. And this considering the fair trade minimum price and also the fair trade premium. So they want companies to understand and support them in their initiatives and their projects on organization, capacity building, living income, climate change, resilience, child labor, and also gender inclusion. Yes, so that's what I can say about the benefits of buying perfect products or producers.
Yeah, thank you, Sandhya. That's so interesting to hear that, you know, it's great to hear you say that the producers don't want gifts or favors, they want to be seen so that their products can be sold and they can benefit from the incomes that gives them. So linking into that then, Sophie, perhaps I can turn to you to tell us a bit about how you reflect that fairness and reflect farmers in your marketing work, and perhaps touch on how Divine is owned in terms of the farmer relationships.
Sure, thanks Nilofer, and hi everybody. So to answer the latter question first, so Divine Chocolate is co-owned by a cooperative of cocoa farmers in Ghana called the Kwapa Cocoa Cooperative. It's a cooperative made up of 100,000 farmers, and it was actually a group of those farmers back in 1997 who voted to set up Divine as a chocolate company, really because they wanted to gain a greater share of the wealth that they were helping to create. So really in line with what Sandhya was saying around, it's about actually wealth and their income and the hard work that goes into growing the beans and being able to gain a greater slice of that pie, greater than 6%, which is a really shocking number actually when you think about it. And so Divine has always been co-owned by farmers, which means they have a share in the profits that Divine generates, but also a say in how the company is run. And I think that's really crucial, that they have a voice and visibility within the business and can guide the strategic direction of the business. But also we really see the producers of Kwapa as our partners as we develop plans, projects, and also communications. So in terms of fairness and farmers, it's absolutely at the heart of Divine and has been since day one and will continue to be. The challenge, or I guess rather the opportunity we have, is how we make that appealing to consumers in our communications. And I think there's two things to this. It's one, it's really about being very clear, and Sandhya mentioned this as well, being really clear to consumers about the impact that their purchase makes. And I think the way to do that, and the experiences that we've had as designers to do that via storytelling, is to really get across emotive response and connection between producers and consumers. The cocoa supply chain is pretty complicated, and it's really our job as brand marketers to bring that to life in an engaging way and an emotive way that really helps turn the dial for consumers. And we've got lots of examples of doing that through lots of different mediums and lots of different creative ways. And I think that's the important thing. There isn't just one way to communicate it, and importantly, to try lots of different ways.
And Sophie, I know you did quite a lot of work on that through the recent Fairtrade Fortnight. Do you have a couple of examples of how that went in terms of that storytelling?
Yeah, absolutely. So we, for all of the 22 years that Divine has existed, bar this year and last year due to COVID, we have invited producers over to the UK and some years to the US to meet audiences, to meet businesses, to meet consumers. So unfortunately that wasn't possible over the past 2 years. So this year instead we decided to host a virtual Q&A and story session with 2 farmers called Alice and Ajin, live from Ajin's farm in Ghana. And it was really an opportunity for Alice and Ajin to share their own stories. We always say as Divine that we act as the megaphone for the farmer's voice as that platform. What was so wonderful about this event during Fairtrade Fortnight is that actually we weren't the megaphone, it was the farmers sharing their own stories from their own voices. And I think that is incredibly powerful. And the level of engagement that we saw with not only our consumer audience, but also a business audience was really amazing. And I can't tell you how many questions were streaming into that Q&A because of the level of curiosity that people have about the lives of farmers, the impact that fair trade was making, and particularly around that topic on climate change, how the farmers were dealing with it, and also the support they were getting via fair trade was something that the audience were really, really interested in. So I think again that human to human connection, which virtually can be challenging, but at the same time opened up a really wonderful opportunity for consumers to have a kind of keyhole look into the life of Ajin and Alice, live from Ajin's cocoa farm, where he was picking cocoa beans from the tree whilst he was speaking. So it was a pretty unique and special event.
Really powerful, Sophie. And as you say, hearing people tell their own stories in their own voices is really moving, and makes that connection with the consumers. And building on that, so Amy, I know you've done a lot of work with the teams at Waitrose to share your sustainability stories. So can you tell us a little bit about your experiences of that and what you've done lately to tell your sustainability stories and raise awareness?
Yeah, so yeah, it's great to hear what Sophie and the team at Divine have been up to. They always do some amazing things, but I think similar to them really, we've been focusing our communications on sharing those individual stories of impact. So individual farmers and workers within the fair trade system, giving those producers a platform to share their story. And I think that really helps bring our customers and producers closer together and provide customers with a better understanding of where the product comes from and the work that goes into making that a quality product, because quality is something that we really try and focus in on our messaging. You know, the highlight of our calendar, of our shared marketing calendar with Fairtrade, is obviously Fairtrade Fortnight. Although we do try and make sure we do activity throughout the year to make sure that customers don't see Fairtrade as a once a year annual celebration, but rather something that's a priority for us throughout the year. So this year we wanted to understand the impact of our cocoa sourcing commitment better. So last year we moved all of our cocoa in our confectionery to fair trade, which increased the volumes we were purchasing fourfold. And we really wanted to be able to share the impact that was having, basically. So we worked with fair trade to find a local photographer who could meet some of the farmers working in our cocoa supply chain in Côte d'Ivoire. And then we've used those case studies and those images in our external and internal channels. And externally, that includes things like our Waitrose Weekend magazine, our social media feeds, our customer emails, website updates, that kind of thing. But particularly important for us as well is making sure that our colleagues, or our partners as we call them, as we're a co-owned business, also understand what we're doing in fair trade and why it matters, because they are talking to our customers every day. So each year we put a focus on raising partner awareness. We do this through our internal magazine and our intranet, but also by running events, which I think are really impactful. So although we couldn't do it in person this year, last year we had Leo Caddy, who was over in the UK with Fairtrade Foundation. She came into both our Waitrose and John Lewis head office and spoke to colleagues directly to share the impact of Fairtrade on her personally. She talked about her life, she talked about her family, her day-to-day activities, and the impact that she was seeing on climate change on her communities and how Fairtrade was helping. And that was really well received. And for our commercial teams, so that's our buyers, our product developers, it was really helpful for them to be able to see how their everyday decisions that they're making about our sourcing and what their purchasing practices, how buying fair trade is making that difference. So I think that was really important activities that we've been doing over the last year or two.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that, Amy. So interesting to hear the connection with the shoppers, but also amongst staff, and how that helps make the connection between everyone's day jobs and the impact that they're having. It's really interesting. So Sondi, perhaps if I can come back to you, we've heard from Sophie and Amy about some great examples of how they're building their fair trade comms. When there isn't a chance to connect directly with producers, or even when there is, what's your sense of how producers want to be seen? What's your sense of how the sort of messages that producers want to be saying about the impact that fair trade is having?
Okay, so our cocoa producers want first to be presented as success stories. So, for example, one of our Fairtrade certified cooperatives was awarded the best cooperative in Côte d'Ivoire in 2020. And at the annual Ngoma Award ceremony organized by Fairtrade Africa, the same cooperative won the prize for the best development project financed by Fairtrade Premium. Yes. So such a cooperative wants its story to be about the period before and after sustainability. So before and after fair trade. How through fair trade action and international partnerships, it became a national example. How it became a community leader, yes. And it should also be noted that producers are more engaged in talking about their own successes and their challenges. So, for example, the RIS, the National Fair Trade Network, works currently on a campaign, and I work with them to support for the World Chocolate Day. So this is run by Fairtrade Africa, Fairtrade Foundation, and also Fairtrade America. And for this campaign, producers are directly involved in social media and other aspects of the campaign. But I know, Nilisa, you are also involved in this project, and maybe you can tell us more about that if we have time. Yes.
Yes, and everyone can look out for the social media activity on that kicking off, which has already kicked off, and more will be coming tomorrow. And on that, I can see a couple of questions coming in from the audience, so thank you for that. I'd like a couple of more, please. So please do put your questions into the Q&A function so that we can broaden it out to the panelists in a couple of minutes. But thank you, Sondia, for sharing that. It's as you say, producers are achieving so many successes on their own, And I think the sort of outdated model of talking about UK consumers somehow benevolently giving benefits to fair trade producers is long gone. Producers are achieving massive successes for themselves, and it's really important for us to work with them so that they're able to present themselves the way they wish in our comms.
Okay. Maybe by making a comparison, you can see the benefits the fair trade producers have. So for a non-certified farmer, it produces and markets its products by itself and by his own means. So in this condition, it's difficult for them to produce accordingly to the requirements of any sustainability standard. And they struggle to obtain a market and then to sell their volume. So sometimes they are not paid at a fair price. So that's a bit tricky. On the other hand, fair trade producers benefit from design support as soon as they are certified or as soon as they receive the permission to trade. So as support, fair trade producers benefit of technical support. They are compliant with the standards and they produce sustainably. They also benefit from strategic planning support, from training on standards, from pre and post-audit support. They also have training on different thematics like good agricultural practices, financial management, governance, or social compliance. Yes, and they also receive support on access to market. The second point is audit. So fair trade cooperatives have annual audits carried out to ensure traceability, democracy, respect of workers' rights, gender inclusion, and taking into account the risk of deforestation and also the risk of child labor. The third point is about the fair trade premium. So as we all know, agriculture is not easy, and price swings, climate change, and limited access to credit is also an issue. So all these facts create pressure on producers. They often struggle to stretch the earnings from one harvest to the next one, and via fair trade, earnings from the fair trade premium, the fair trade minimum price can help addressing such challenges. So the fair trade minimum price represents a formal safety net that protects farmers from being forced to sell their products at too lower price when the market price is below the fair trade minimum price. And then on the top of this fair trade minimum price for most products as cocoa, the fair trade approach includes a fair trade premium. So that's an additional sum of money that farmers and workers invest in projects. In projects they choose by themselves at General Assembly. And the last point is about sustainable projects. So when a producer is fair trade certified, important challenges are directly addressed, such as child labor, living income, resilience to climate change, including deforestation, and also diversification. So an example, Ben & Jerry has launched a diversification project for empowering the women's group in 4 Ivorian cooperatives. And they also create living income generating activities for young people. So for inclusion of women and youth. In addition, the company is also engaged in a living income project for which Ben & Jerry pays an additional price to the producers compared to the living income reference price. And similarly, funding from cooperative for COP UK and Compass Group as funding the Women's School of Leadership in Côte d'Ivoire for the last 3 years to support women to take up more leadership roles in the communities, but also to diversify their crops and income in order to better equip them to face climate change, challenges. Yeah.
Sandia, thank you. That's a brilliant overview of the breadth of impact that fair trade has across so many different areas, from climate change to gender, through the minimum price, through the premium. So, Sophie, to take some of those broad themes that Sandia has just spoken about, I understand that Divine is on the brink of a gorgeous brand refresh. Could you give us perhaps a sneak preview and tell us a bit about how you worked with farmers to develop that brand refresh and how you're going to be communicating some of that impact that Sandia mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Nilüfer. So yes, really exciting and busy time at Divine at the moment. So come autumn, we'll be relaunching the brand with an updated look and feel across our packaging and our comms, and also a clearer communication message to our audiences and to new consumers as well. So it's very much, we see it as a build on everything that we have worked on over the past 22 years. So we're not going off track, we're really building on those credentials, which, coming back to your first question around fairness and farmers, absolutely kind of at the heart of this brand refresh. But we're looking at ways to really turn the dial in terms of how we're communicating that and how we're reaching new audiences with our message. We have worked really hand in hand with the representatives from Kwapa Cocoa to develop this relaunch project. So from the packaging design, that's been co-created with the farmer representatives, as well as our communication approach. And I think really the important thing here to say is, certainly from a brand and marketing perspective, that absolutely gives me 100% confidence that what we are saying and doing is authentic. It's really important for a purpose-led brand. I think for any brand, I would argue actually, to have that authenticity at the core of your brand. And so that's why I'm really excited about what we've got to show come autumn to audiences. And we've also really managed to find a way to make that impact very clear for consumers. So Waitrose being our lead customer, it's really important for us, for a Waitrose shopper on shelf, to be able to see and understand the impact they're making if they purchase Divine. Back to kind of what Sandia was saying around, let's really help consumers understand the difference that they can make with their purchasing. And doing that in an emotive rather than rational way is what we found is going to really help us turn the dial for Divine. So yes, really exciting time. And I can't wait to, in a couple of months, share all of the communications and stories with everybody.
Can't wait either, as if anyone needed more of a reason to buy Divine chocolate. The new brand sounds fantastic. And that was a great answer to one of the many questions that's come through from the audience. And building on that, so Amy, a question for you, which is very similar to what Sophie was just touching on. Amy, a question on how important is branding to consumers and influencing their purchase decision? So what's your sense based on what Sophie's just described of the emotive branding and the impact that has on shoppers in their purchase motivation?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, because I mentioned earlier, you know, we know customers online are trying to find out a little bit more, and to sort of see more information on pack is really helpful to customers to understand the impact of the purchase that they're making. Also understand customers are increasingly interested in transparency of supply chain. So if you've got that really obvious and direct link with farmers through Divine, you know, you're sourcing from one cooperative, for example, you know, customers really appreciate that honesty in understanding the supply chain that they're buying into. And I think, you know, we know that how well recognized the Fairtrade logo is, and that is, customers understand that as a mark of quality and assurance that their product's been sourced in a sustainable and responsible way. And I think we've really tried at Waitrose over the last, you know, well, since we started working with Fairtrade, to try and make those kind of ethical choices simple for customers, because I think it's a really confusing space. And we've done that through our decisions about stocking only Fairtrade own brand ranges for key products like the coffees, the teas, the block chocolates, because we want to make it really simple and straightforward for customers to make a responsible choice. And I think, yeah, the more information, customers want to know more information on pack about where things are coming from. And I think so that branding is really important. And as both Sophie and I have mentioned before, having that individual story of impact, and that, yeah, understanding from a farmer, how that purchase is making a difference is really important. And when you can bring that into the customer's basket, whether it's virtually online or whether it's in a store, I think that's really valuable.
Yeah. And lots of questions in the chat as well that we might not be able to get to on this panel, but we will try and respond to all of them as a follow-up. So I'm going to ask one final question and then ask the panelists to wrap. But the final questions of building on your point, Amy, is really linked to that sort of shopper connection and making it simple for shoppers to understand. Are there particular types of stories or comms messages that have particularly resonated and worked well? Amy or Sophie?
I can take that, Amy. I would say stories that have an identifiable thread between a consumer and a producer. So I mentioned climate change as one that we saw lots of engagement on over Fairtrade Fortnight, because it's an issue that is understood and known, be it from a producer or consumer perspective, although the issues might be different, but it was a topic that had a lot of emotive engagement in it. The other areas that we've seen in terms of topics that have worked well is around really connecting people around shared moments. So Christmas, Mother's Day, Easter, what does Christmas mean for a producer and their family versus what we know it means for us? And I think that in these kind of quite commercial seasons and holidays, how do you actually weave in a story of interconnection with producers and make that something that's interesting and engaging for the audience? So we quite often see quite a lot of engagement around key chocolate moments that resonate for both a producer and a consumer.
Fantastic, thank you, Sophie. There are so many more questions, and this is such a rich area of discussion. I'm afraid we're not going to be able to get to everything today, but I do hope that we can continue this conversation offline, and do please get in touch with us, and we will try and get back on some of the questions as well. But I'd really just like to ask the speakers to share their final thoughts. So I think we've heard really eloquently from Sondhi about the way that producers want to be seen and how they want to represent themselves, and from Sophie and Amy on making that personal connection between shoppers, consumers and producers. So Amy, do you have a final thought to leave the audience with today?
I think it's just I mean, we've all heard this before, but there is an importance in voting with your wallet, I guess. We sometimes get, when a customer goes into a shop, and I'm guilty of it myself, you sort of forget and make the fastest choice or whatever. But I think it's always really important to try and make that responsible choice. And as I said, we're trying to make it very easy for people in Waitrose, but it's not always the case everywhere else. So please do, I mean, we've heard from Sonia today absolutely the reasons why Fairtrade is making such an impact and such a difference. So I think continue to vote with your wallets, and to encourage other brands as well to be more transparent and open about their sourcing and supply chains, because I think that's really important.
Thank you, Amy. And Sophie, do you have any final words to leave with leave the audience with?
Yeah, sure. I think I'd just quite like to say I truly believe it's our responsibility as brands and companies, as well as our opportunity to integrate the producer voice in our communications. And I think actually we can find really creative ways to do that meaningfully and authentically, so that we help consumers, as to Amy's point, understand the difference that purchase makes, because ultimately I believe that's absolutely the starting point for challenging the issues in the cocoa industry or other commodity industries and some of the bigger challenges that the world is facing.
Thank you, Sophie. And last word to you, Sonia, as being the closest to the producers. What would your final message be?
Okay. Can I say that we are all responsible. I want to engage its companies and together let's choose sustainability and contribute to fair trade practices. So let's choose fair trade and let's buy fair trade. Thank you.
Well, that's a perfect message to end on, Sonia. Let's buy fair trade, and certainly going back to the consumer insight, we know that is the really important feeling of being part of a community, a global community between consumers, producers, and businesses. So I would really just like to wrap by thanking everyone, especially the three fantastic panelists we've had, the team behind the scenes who've worked so hard to make today's webinar happen, and of course to all of you who have joined us today. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of the many questions, but thank you so much for your engagement. Do please look out for social media activity and PR activity around World Chocolate Day, and more stories of cocoa farmers and the impact that Fairtrade's had on them. And if you'd like to learn more about Fairtrade, then do please sign up to our newsletter. You'll be the first to hear about the next webinar. So thank you everyone for participating today. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day. And thank you and goodbye.